Today, my guest, Eric Gallagher, and I are going to explore the impact of alcohol addiction and misuse on families, children, and spiritual well-being. This can be a tough conversation, but it's an important one, and it's meant to raise awareness and to provide encouragement for those on a journey to drink less or not at all. Eric Gallagher is a husband and father of 4 from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. He has served over 20 years in full-time ministry at both the parish and diocesan levels. Eric is the founder of the Catholic Best and serves as the president and executive director of Sushipi, a nonprofit focused on deep formation of young people in the spiritual life. Welcome, Eric, to the program.
Christy, thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here. Preparing for this was an interesting spiritual exercise for me because I've given my testimony many times, but that's usually just kind of you brush over some of these things. So to really think about some of these things was, again, really, really beautiful. So thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So yeah, with that, why don't you go ahead and just share a bit about you and your story?
Yeah, so for the last 15 years or so, I've been living in Sioux Falls. As you mentioned, I'm married to my wife, Desiree. We have 4 children, and I've been in full-time ministry for 20 years and just recently left full-time ministry to pursue some more of my own kind of efforts that I've just really wanted to focus in on. And my life in ministry really started through the process of the way that God brought me to him, which was a direct result of my mother's alcoholism. And it was something that I was in high school. There was kind of this moment, like everything was normal growing up for us as kids. At least you felt like it was normal, especially in the community that we were in and the circles that we were in. It seemed like it wasn't unusual for someone in your class to say, "Hey, I saw your mom at the bar last night," or something. Like there's just like, it was a small town. And so you just kind of grew up with that. So it wasn't out of the ordinary. But the great kind of scandal and trauma in my life was, I remember coming home from school one day and I walked into the house, and in my kitchen were all of my mom's siblings, and they had showed up to do an intervention. And no one had told at least no one told me. Maybe they told my siblings. I never really asked them, but I didn't even know really what alcoholism, like I didn't know that it was really a thing, or that it was a serious thing, or really that it had a hold on my mother. Like, you knew there was things, like there's some embarrassing moments, there's some things, but that was family life. I think it just felt normal. And so she went off to get treatment, and that really led me down a path of just confusion. I was a freshman in high school at the time. My brother had just left, my older brother just left for college, and it's just me and my younger sister in the house. And really over the next couple of years, it just unfolded into, she went to treatment, she came back, she fell apart again, and ended up just a cycle of many things, which led to a divorce of my parents. And so that them separating pretty quickly in the midst of all that. And after a couple of years of divorce, and as a high schooler, just angry. And we still go to mass every week. We'd still, all the Catholic stuff, we still go to religious education, but there was definitely this war going on inside of me. I think my dad saw that, and he made a comment one time that he just said, "If there's anything you ever want to do in the church, I'll pay for it. I'll just make sure that you're taken care of." And so in my effort to kind of escape, I asked if he would send me this church camp that someone told me about. And I went, and long story short, like the Lord just kind of swept the floor with me. And I was encouraged at this camp to really pray to God and say, just tell him what's on my heart. And I essentially said, "God, I'm angry, I'm confused." I might even told him that I hate him. But I said, if you are real, you got 10 seconds to show me. And he did. It's like the conversion experience that many people listening can probably relate to, of just coming to know the beauty and the love of Christ in a powerful way. That happened that night, and everything kind of changed. And so I'll kind of leave it there, and we can continue to go through the story. But really, that's what started the trajectory of me of trying to look at my life seriously, trying to figure these things out, kind of stop blaming things on everyone and everything, and just kind of taking ownership for myself and saying I need to grow up quickly, more quickly than I probably needed to. And fortunately, it was through the grace of God and through the life in the church. So there was a really healthy foundation that started being laid as my priest, especially where I was growing up, really saw this conversion in me and began to take interest in that in my life. And then just being able to kind of essentially just gave my life to the church. And I went to school for music in college, but that's because I didn't really know how to be a professional church person. In this small town, no one did that. You didn't go get religious degrees or anything. But I always knew that I wanted to work for the church. And so I did. And that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And along all in those 20 years also, of course, just this ongoing, like, what's happening, like what happens, and who am I, and why did all these things happen? If you speed up, we lost track of my mom for a while. I spent a year overseas in Iraq, and I think that was one of the times where we kind of reconnected, and we were still kind of in touch. But really, it was up until about 5-6 years ago. I don't think we talked or really knew where she was. Our kids, me and my siblings, for about 5 or 6 years. And then we got a call saying that she had cancer, and so that led down this beautiful path of we ended up kind of reconnecting with her. She had never met my kids before, so she got to meet, like, my kids have asked me before, we've done those question exercises, and they're like, what's some of the best trips you've ever had? And for me, it was, my top one is the time we went all the way up. We took the 7-hour drive to go see grandma for the first time, and we stayed in a hotel, and like, just my kids got to meet my mom. She ended up moving as her health got worse and worse. She ended up moving into town here, and we were able to spend, I think it was about a year, 18 months with her before she passed. And then alongside of that, I got to see her own kind of conversion back into the church. She always had this passion for the Blessed Mother. You could ask her, like, she I think received the emails every week of the Medjugorje messages, and she would read these all, like, she didn't have great thoughts about a lot of things about the church, but she was very convicted of the Blessed Mother. So she had an interesting faith, but we had to commute to bring her in and out of town for her appointments, and just lots of conversations. Because I think initially her thought was that I went to this camp and I drank this Kool-Aid and I went crazy. Yeah. They gave me something, and I was different now, and she didn't like that. But I think as she got to know me over those last couple of years, she ended up being able to go to this communal penance service. We got her to confession. She received all the sacraments, and lived a very, like, holy, healthy, beautiful last several months of her life. And so I don't know, I get excited because I think something that might be interesting for even people who are listening to my story, like, I've already talked about her alcoholism being the way and the reason that I am who I like involved in the church and the life that I have. Like, you can blame and thank my mother's alcoholism, right, and by God's grace to be where I am, and as well as her cancer and this early death that she had. Probably one of the most grace-filled, beautiful realities of my family's life was to engage in that time with her. So I come at all this from a very grateful, blessed perspective. There's a lot of messiness, of course. There's a lot of chaos in all of it. But God's really good.
Your story, wow, it's beautiful, and such, I mean, I'm just struck so much by how God's grace, like, just held you the whole time, even in those times when you were so angry at him. And, the idea that your dad had to, like, I will pay for anything, like, seeing that in you, that was definitely a grace that he had, I think, to say, like, God was saying, like, you need to talk to him, you need to do this. And how beautiful that it has taken you to where you are now, and been able to just help so many people. And I know from my own experience too, and so many others that I talk to, we do go through these trials. We do go through these hard times. We're not promised perfect lives, and nobody has them. We all have suffering in so many ways. But if we allow God, then he can really use that to bless others and blesses us in the process as well. And it heals those wounds. And I know the more that I've moved closer to God and grown in my faith, the more I can see his goodness and greatness and love. And it sounds like that happened for you as well. And it's so beautiful that you are also able to recognize, like, you stopped blaming and stopped being that victim, like so many of us can get caught up in, and just moved forward and wanted to use that to help others. And I think that that is just amazing and so beautiful that you are able to reconnect, bring your children to your mom, and also, whether she liked it or not, lead her even closer to the faith and to the Lord. And I I just love that. And I hear stories, I think we can go in a couple different directions. I hear people either go completely away from what their parents did with alcohol, how they drank, or, what their home life was like. And that's always a great thing to hear about. But then there's also the reverse, where you hear that they're just repeating what happened to them, to their children. And it just like breaks their heart because they can see it, because they remember what life was like when they were young. And then they're still repeating that. But then they have this like epiphany or this awakening where they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not doing this to myself or my kids. This is not how I'm going to live. So I've seen it both ways, but yours is surely absolutely beautiful. And I thank you so much for sharing all of that.
I think we try to simplify it sometimes too, of like like every kid has a choice, and
Mhm.
they should just choose like the thing they want. And it's not that easy because Satan's involved. He's trying to use all of this to tear everything apart. God's in trying to use it all for his goodness and his grace. He's trying to perfect
Mhm.
all things and make good with all things. And there's very like kind of human things to deal with. There's spiritual things to deal with. There's just so many layers of stuff. And as a high schooler, as a freshman, like I'm pretty ignorant towards things. And I just had made some of these decisions of, my mom's a horrible person because why would she do this? Right. And so
Mhm.
there's a great ignorance there, which later was corrected when I remember kind of talking to my dad about that. And he didn't share much, but he essentially shared, like, from a beautiful charitable perspective, like, well, she's had a really rough life.
Mm.
And I don't know much about my mom's life. Later, I learned more and more. And actually, the more the light kind of shone on all of reality of what was going on, like my heart began to grow to love my mom more
Mhm.
and more. And so I
Mhm.
think, and so being a ninth grader is kind of a thing. So I think the age of where things kind of occur, but yeah, it's not as simple as I did have that mindset of like, when I started dating and thinking about marriage, the simplicity was really just like, I don't want my kids to have to go through what I went through. And there's nothing really spiritual about that.
Mhm.
There's just a really psychological kind of emotional pain that's directing that. Um, so I think the story that I have, by God's grace, because I know dozens of other people who could share a similar story with a different ending. And so I recognize how good God has been to me to give me what I don't deserve and
Mhm.
barely asked for.
Mhm.
So I'm grateful, but it's tough. And I think that if I were to find one similar pattern, I think, um, I just think generally families love each other and they want the best for each other, regardless of how old anyone is or where they've been. And I think if there's one commonality, it's we just need to learn to bring things out into light a little bit and just be open and honest with each other. Because if I look at kind of the key moments where I experienced like a greater openness and a greater I don't know, just process to healing or process to just clarity in my life. It was just when I started to actually come to realize what was going on in all the stuff. And
Hmm.
that's it's not as simple as your mom doesn't like you, so she's drinking.
Hmm.
And but that's what the evil one's punching into my brain over and over and over again. And so it's yeah, and you start to realize, well, mom, I love you. I just don't want this for you anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because it's kind of hurting everything. But if everyone can come together in different ways, then that's been the most helpful part. Obviously, in my story, that was tried. Like they tried to kind of get all the help, but there was such a stronghold on things. It just took time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I can relate to that so much. Like my dad suffered from addiction, and he died at age 47. And I remember being so mad at him. Like I was mad at him for a long time, like, and playing the victim, like he wasn't the dad I deserved. He was, my parents divorced when I was like 5, thought he was so selfish. And I thought he loved his drugs and his alcohol more than he loved me. And I mean, I was around him, but I didn't like grow up, and he wasn't in our home. So I did have that um blessing that he wasn't around, like doing that in front of me. But I still had so much animosity. And even when I stopped drinking myself, I was still mad. But in going through my recovery and understanding the reasons why I was over drinking, why I had my alcoholism, it gave me greater compassion for him. And then, like you, my mom shared with me um, about my dad's childhood and some of the things he experienced and all of that. And it just, when you said that your heart swelled, I felt that too, like for my dad. And I could see him as a child and love him and, just understand that he didn't want the life that he had, but, he didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't have the tools, the resources, or like the faith foundation that I was blessed to have. And so I think we just, try to do better and help like stop that cycle. Like, and that's where I got to the point. I'm like, I'm never doing that to my children or my family or anything like that. But you're right. The evil one does like pick at you because he picked at my identity. Like, nobody loves you. Everyone's going to abandon you. I didn't trust people for a long time. I had this very unhealthy, unholy self-reliance and control, like needing to control everything. And that was based on a lot of that experience. And it's hard for kids because it's confusing because you love your parent, like you were saying, you just love them and you want them to be happy and you want them to be healthy, but you can't do anything. It's hard for us as adults, right? If we have a spouse or somebody that we love who is suffering from addiction, or even they're just misusing alcohol and it's causing a lot of chaos, we can't do it for them. We can't want it enough for them. We can't wish it or pray. I mean, we can pray and that can definitely help. But they have to want it. They have to get to a place where they want that help. And so many times I've heard, and I'm sure my dad thought this often, is like, it's not hurting anyone else. It's not hurting anyone. It's, yes, it's causing me anxiety. It's causing these loss of relationships and these types of things. But really, I'm just trying to medicate myself. I'm trying to heal this trauma. I'm trying to do all this stuff, and it's not hurting anyone. When in reality, it's like that trickle down effect, unfortunately. But then we have to stop it and say, you know what? It ends with me.
Yeah, and I think that's and even part of the mediation process or like when my mom went to treatment, that's part of the process is the family has to come in and share the ways
Mm-hmm.
that it has hurt them. And depending on and so I did that twice with my mom because she was in treatment twice. And it was interesting because one of them was when I was 15, 16 years old, and the other one was when I was 30 something. And my two siblings were with me both times, and I don't remember much about the one when I was a freshman, but I do remember like it was so obvious how different and how capable I was of entering into what's actually needed to help here. And so I think that's part of the reality of someone who's struggling is we can be more helpful, like when I get older, like, but the ways that I can help, it changes as you get to be an adult. Like as I become more mature and able to, again, even just when I move past kind of the alcoholism and just treat my mom like mom, and just love her. And that's really when I felt things started to change, where she always, until the day she passed, she had alcohol to some extent. I mean, she weaned off quite a bit in the last couple of years. But at some point you just got to love the heck out of her. And that's when things started to change. And so in those initial phases, that's the hardest part, is I watched my dad really try to do what he could to love her and to help her. And it just seemed to go nowhere many times. And then as kids, you just don't even know where to start, because you're like, come on, you're the parents, you should be able to figure this out.
Right.
But I agree. I do think as I've now been an adult and worked with people and even had my own experiences of struggles of even things like technology, like you really do just got to kind of draw a line in the sand. And this is where Lent is really helpful, because you should be able to put something aside for 40 days. And if you can't, then maybe we really need to look at this.
Right.
But I think that's it. It alleviates some of the pressure of, we know this is hard, right? And an addiction is not the end of the world, but don't we want better? Like, and so let's start. Like it can be slow, but also the commitment to make a change. You're right. You just have to say, I'm just not going to do it now. And we just have to stop. And not that that's easy, of course. Try anyone to put their cell phone away for 2 hours and they're going to struggle with it. So I don't know. It's just got to be something that I think people can come together and work through. It's just like to me, it's not the same, of course, as other addictions, but in the church, there are many other forms of addiction that are incredibly problematic and also harm other people. But I think the solutions are generally the same. You just need support, you need prayer, you need dependence on others and God, and your family. You just got to, you need to do it together and learn to receive the love that God has for you and whatever. And I remember giving a talk at a men's, it was a youth retreat, and there was a men's session. We were talking about the struggle with pornography, and I basically ridiculed all these like lists, like you just got to do this, like make sure your computer's out in the open, and and do this, and then it always ends with like, oh, and by the way, remember to pray, and that always frustrated me, and so I said, you know what, if you'll learn to do, like, you'll be able to stop doing this when you learn to receive the love of God, and that becomes more important to you than the addiction itself. It takes time, like it's really hard, it's painful. That's literally the journey that everyone's on, is to learn to like surrender, submit to the life and the will of God, and to allow it to consume every part of you. So yeah, I just think there's so much into it, but a firm commitment, a firm resolve. The church teaches us that very well through how we do confession, and even at Mass, there's moments where we just say, I do this, I believe this, and we have to say it and act on it. And we need to model that even in these situations.
Right now, alcohol feels like the only way that you can cope with the stress of motherhood, social pressures, and maybe even fit in with your group of friends. But you're starting to realize that it's leaving you feeling ashamed, disconnected, and maybe even out of control. Imagine if you could wake up each morning feeling at peace and proud of the choices that you're making, and free from the pressure to drink, whether that's at home or in social settings. And that, my friend, is where my 5-day Sacred Sobriety Kickstart comes in. By the end of the 5 days, you will feel more peaceful and in control, because you will have more clarity and confidence around your decisions to take it or leave it. You're also going to learn how to manage your mind in a way that is aligned with your faith. You will learn how to speak truth over yourself, and that will help you root out what's keeping you stuck. So check out my 5-day Sacred Sobriety Kickstart and gain the clarity you need to make the decision to take alcohol or leave it from a place of peace. You can visit my website, thecatholicsobrietycoach.com. I have a pop-up there, or just go to my show notes.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad that you brought up other addictions and other attachments too, because that's something that we all struggle with. I think I didn't miss out on anything with my kids because I was drinking, but I might have had my phone up when they were trying to tell me something, right? And so these attachments keep us from hearing things we're supposed to hear, seeing things we're supposed to see, experiencing things we're supposed to experience. And that can be a real spiritual attack. I see it when I think of how alcohol especially has been marketed to women and the way that our culture is right now and the way that our world is right now. It's just giving women like, oh, you can't handle motherhood. You can't handle this. Here's this comfort. And for men, it's pornography. And I know women struggle with it too, but it's really pushed for men. And now for our children, like, oh, you don't feel good enough. You don't feel loved. You don't feel here's somebody who will love you. So there are those ways that the enemy is just trying to give us solutions for. He's trying to give us counterfeit solutions for things that really need a God solution. We need the Lord. And that's really hard because you can, like you were saying, you can't just say, oh, just pray it away, just, whatever. Yes, that does help. I remember when I was struggling with the urge, I was sober, but I cried out to God and I said, God, I need you to remove this urge to drink or I'm not gonna be able to do this. And he did. So, I am very, very firm on prayer works and it helps, but we have to keep asking, we have to keep approaching him. So how you work with a lot of youth, which I think is amazing and wonderful. How do you see these comforts, which have increased so much since you and I were kids? It's even more in our face and in their face and hard to be a young person. How do you help the youth that you work with be in the world, but learn to kind of detach so that they can connect with the Lord and have that encounter? Because we can't encounter God. You can, but it's a little bit more difficult, scrolling reels every day. You can, but it's just a lot harder because you don't have that quiet.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about when you cried out to God, like what you had in that moment was an alertness, like an awareness and the capability, the capacity within you to make that prayer. And that's where we don't do the prep work to like live a life where that is always available to us. Right. I think that's the greatest struggle that many people have in all these things is, well, you start scrolling and then you become numb. And then all of a sudden, like all of your guards are down and your sleep. Like I did tower duty for 6 months in Iraq. And all we did is look out in the middle of a desert for something. And it's very easy to just like tap your buddy over here and be like, hey, wake me up if you see anything. like you just, it doesn't seem, if there doesn't seem to be much purpose or much to look forward to, then we want to, because it takes exercise, it takes work. It's almost painful to try to engage in the right way. That's the fault of original sin, right? The stain of original sin is we're going to constantly be pulled away from this comfort or this joy, this real life that God wants to give us. And so it takes this exercise. And if we're becoming lazy, or we just get weaker and weaker and weaker, and you're less likely to cry out and say, God, I need you. Yes, it's always a possibility in the moment and by God, but we don't want to like hope that God gives us the grace in those moments.
Right.
Like we can do our part to be ready. So I think that's generally the main exercise that our young people, our families are not taking into account is you have to have silence. You have to have a presence, a daily dependency on what's happening around you and receive, like letting it's the Marian, let it be done. Like just be present and receive everything that God has in store for you rather than trying to fill it yourself. I did in a lot of the retreats that I lead, I often have this statement where I say, well, God, if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to, right? We have this tendency in our minds of where we really think something should be happening and we believe in God, but if God's not going to do it, then we're just going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a disordered like way that I live daily. Like I know that my mind processes in a roundabout way that all the time. And I think what it's doing to our young people is they're longing to be a part of a presence, like the present moments and relationally to be paid attention to. And I don't just think this is our young people, but what's lacking is someone taking the time to just sit and get to know you, ask you questions, hear about the things that there's nothing more important than you in that moment. And what cell phones do, and I see this so many times as a parent, like I'm looking around and my kids are doing things and I'm on my phone and I know how much that's communicating to them. Well, he's doing something important and my thing must not be that important. And I, even with my mom as an alcoholic, like that was the thing that I always struggled with is she did miss several of my important events in high school. And you have that same mindset. Well, there must be something more important than me right now. And that's really difficult because as a kid, you don't want that seed, that foundational seed thought planted into your mind, because that's gonna frustrate your faith life. That's gonna frustrate all your anytime you encounter anyone or anytime, like I see this a lot of people, you send a text and a person doesn't respond to you for like a couple of hours. Oh, there must be something more important than me. Like, well, no, they probably just didn't even look at their phone or like there's so many other reasons. But I think that fundamental reality of just learning to be in the presence of God, to be in presence of the reality of what's happening around you, learning to receive and be present in the moment and available, all of these like deep spiritual practices that are just neglected in our human nature these days, like in our culture, like this is just not what happens anymore. And so I think that's the struggle that our young people have. And so what I've done to counter that, for about 12 years, I took a couple of years break, but I'm getting back into them. But we actually started leading, they're essentially silent retreats for high schoolers. And we invited young people who had this deep longing to be known, to be loved, like all the what everyone wants, basically. But we're willing to make the sacrifice of coming and suffering silence for a weekend. They're willing to put in the work to get it, basically. And we taught them the lives of the saints. Like we would teach them, there's a retreat on Francis de Sales and Ignatius of Loyola. We're teaching them all the spiritual greats and then giving them lots of silence and prayer. And then we were doing one-on-one, instead of any small group ministry, they were meeting with, most of them were trained spiritual directors or they were mentors. And the world began to change around them. Their families began to change. And I think that's what happens when they start to receive the thing that was kind of intended for them in the first place. But parenting, neglect, the world, all the stuff is what it is.
Yeah, I think that there's so much that is vying for our attention constantly and for the youth. So I love that. I don't know if I could do a silent retreat because I feel like I'm so chatty, but I know I could. But for a high schooler, I mean, that's just like, even when my sons, they're in high school and they do retreats every year, and now they're seniors. And I know they take their cell phones, for these retreats. And this will be like a weekend now that they won't have their cell phone. But it's so good for them to detach, because it's so easy for us to be like, oh, I just want to look at this. Oh, I just want to do this. And what we are doing, like what you were saying, with your mom, you thought like, oh, the alcohol must be more important than me. Or when you're on your phone, whatever they're doing must be more important for me. And what we're saying to God when we're doing these things is, this is more important than you right now, than my relationship with you. For our young people, they just have so many voices online, like you were saying, in the home, at school, everywhere else. And just to be able to take that silent time for trying to hear God's voice. How can parents, first of all, try to provide that for their children if they don't have, like a wonderful retreat like you provide, or a parish that has these types of things? How can they do that for their children in a way that doesn't make the kids like resentful, like, oh, we have to go again. Oh, they're dragging me to adoration again, or, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the retreats that I get to offer are really a blessed. I've talked to a lot of youth ministry people around the country. I don't see much of, they try these going deeper retreats, and they'll call them going deeper retreats, but they still do a lot of the fun. It's just classic youth ministry stuff. And they just talk about deeper topics, I think. I think for parents, the most important thing for me, I think, is the realization of, especially if we're talking about alcohol, like, it's not just when you're drinking. It's the drinking is like a symptom of things. Like, are you there? Are you present? Are you, that's the stuff that changes a young person's life. It's really easy. And this, I built a whole big ministry in our diocese around this simple idea that, like, we're just someone who listens. And that's so rare. That's so rare for someone to ask them questions, but ask them questions that are real and challenging and deep, like, and create kind of an intimacy of, like, you know me differently. And I have good friends, but I've never talked to my friends about my relationship with God or whatever. So I think silence and a prayerful presence, wasted time, like, those are some of the most important things you can do as parents. Is again, realize that it's not just when you can't. I know someone really well who claims that they try to be very present, but they're constantly like sneaking off to like quickly respond to an email or a text. Everyone knows it. And so no, you're not. Like, you're not present, and everyone sees it. As much as you try to, like, you're trying. I can see you're trying, and God bless you for trying, but that's not a real presence. And so I think when you're always looking for something else, you have to pay attention to that. And the best way to cultivate that in your home is just to stop trying to look for something else. Right? My vocation as a father, the way that I'm going to get to heaven is received when my kid comes and sits on my lap. And if I'm distracted from that, I'm neglecting and not receiving my vocation from God in the moment. I'm not becoming a father. I'm not allowing myself to be father when I'm distracted. So I think that'd be my first thing, is just to create that culture. I'm a big advocate of silence, obviously, but we actually have silent for probably 5 or 6 years. We've had silence in our house until 7:00 in the morning. That my kids wake up. One of them wakes up really early every morning. And now our kids, as ages change, obviously the times they wake up and go to bed changes and such, but we've always had a pretty strict idea of silence in the morning when we wake up. And when we started, it was just because my wife and I couldn't find any other time to pray. So we just said, we're going to pray during this time. You can go somewhere else, but the living room is silent. I think that's important. And then if I were to encourage parents at all, what I was surprised by when I started doing these retreats, is I didn't think these young people would be capable of receiving the depths of what I really wanted for them. And they surprised the heck out of me. Every time we started these retreats, we did kind of like half of a retreat on Francis de Sales and then half like all the other youth ministry stuff. And they just wanted the Francis de Sales stuff. As we started doing these silent retreats, they were about probably 60-70% silent retreats. They wanted fully silent retreats. And so we added one of those into the mix as we taught about contemplative prayer and such. And you want to set the bar for what it means, and just study lives of some of the saints. My daughter's just doing a school project on Philomena or Saint Philomena, and then looking at the Blessed Mother, of course, and the age that they were at. And we tend to discredit our young people for what they're capable of. Yeah. There's so much there, and yeah, it is our responsibility. We just have to trust, like, it's okay, because what you want, the goal is when they leave the house, I believe. Now, my oldest is a ninth grader, so I'm probably speaking ignorantly as a parent. I don't have the experience of sending them out and seeing if it works basically yet. But I want them to know what they're aspiring for in their life. And all of the other things that they're going to experience should be tested against that. And when they want to go and do this with their life or this with their life, they need to, I hope they'll be able to recognize that they're lacking the most important things that we've ingrained in them, which is silence and a presence in their life that just provides more value than anything you could possibly go for. So that would be my biggest thing is just, yeah, dream big and set standards in your house. I know I have a friend who their Saturday is their family day. Nothing. It's like they because Sunday they do stuff in their church, and people think they're crazy. They're like, well, what do you do about sports that are on Saturdays? And they're like, we don't do them. And people are like scandalized that they like wouldn't even consider, like, how about if it's just like once a week or once a month? Nope. Saturday, like, they have set the standard. And I think parents need to be willing to be a little bit radical in that and realize you're not really missing out. Don't sign your kids like, God, if you're pursuing true virtue, like true holiness and a great presence and availability to God in your life, what else do you need? So I say that, of course, I have 4 kids involved in 80 different things, so I'm not the greatest at that. But I do feel like we're cultivating that well in our kids.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it doesn't sound super overwhelming. I mean, like, your first thing is just be present and listen. So I think that's so doable for all of us. And just exposing them to, like you said, the saints, the sacraments, and just weaving it into your daily life, weaving your faith into your daily life. And it's just part of everything, and it's very normal. And also, I loved what you said about, like, kids are more capable of things than we think of, or maybe they're more receptive to something than we would. Like, we just had Father Calloway here. He did a talk on the Eucharist, and it was a pretty, it did not pull. I mean, he pulled all the punches and everything. It was just very straightforward and very bold. And I was so grateful for it. But I told my husband, I was like, I think we have twins who are seniors this year. And I was like, we should bring them, and we have a son who's 11. Like, we should bring the boys. And he's like, oh, they're not going to want to go, or, whatever. I'm like, no, we should bring them. They loved it.
Yep.
Like, they hemmed and hawed about it. They didn't they weren't super excited about it. They went and they received and they loved it. And I mean, that was beautiful. And I was so glad that the Holy Spirit was like, no, you need to bring those kids. They need to hear his message, because it was beautiful. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't always assume that they're not going to get anything about it. And maybe if they give you a little pushback, still, let them come. And if they go and they don't like it, or they didn't get, let them talk about that too. Like, why didn't you, or what was it that bothered you, and have that as a conversation for sure.
I think a lot of parents I think they don't believe that this is really possible because they themselves aren't really as excited about it as they like to be either. Like, so I see it a lot of times as I've led youth conferences over the years, and it's the parents who are complaining about doing like a full holy hour. Like, well, these kids can't just sit through this. And it's like, well, I did this youth conference, there's 2,000 kids, and it looked like they were just kind of sitting through it. Like, they seem to be doing fine. But there's this interior battle that they themselves are having. And being in youth ministry for 20 years, what I learned is, like, parents have to allow their kids the opportunity to inspire them. Or like, go and when you see your kid get excited about it, and it multiplies, it compounds the inspiration that you yourself receive. And that's the gift of just learning to be present and watch God at work in other people. Is you see God work in other people, and it's tenfold in your own heart when you just got to witness it. And so allowing your kids to, just take a risk, try some things. I think we don't, because we're afraid, well, if they don't like it, then I've failed as a parent. And you just want to, like, not look at it, because then it means something. And so
Right.
don't be afraid, take risks, try it. The most beautiful things that have ever happened in my work in youth ministry, I thought, like, one, I remember just pitching my idea of these retreats to about 15 other diocesan youth directors, and I didn't get a single person that was excited about it with me. And they just thought, you can't, like, at the diocesan level, you're only going to get like 20 kids at the first one or whatever. And there's all kinds of things about it that they weren't digging. And I would just say, like, in hindsight, I look back and just kind of laugh, like, yeah, it was a crazy idea, but I did it because I felt compelled to do it. So if there's that little knot in your heart to say, like, I think my kids should go, and then all these doubts follow it, your kid should go.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I could talk to you forever, and I do want you to be able to tell people where they can find you and all of that. But I have one more question or one more thing to ask of you. So with hindsight of, like, having grown up with a mother that struggled with alcohol and then being a parent yourself and a youth director, what would you say to the woman or the person that's out there, the Catholic that's out there, who is finding that they are struggling with alcohol, that maybe they have it all together on the outside, maybe they think that they're, doing all the things, but they are realizing that alcohol is becoming a problem for them. Maybe they're starting to feel guilt about, like, maybe what their kids have seen or what has happened. Like, what could you say to encourage that person just to move forward?
I remember asking we used to do these discussion journals in ministry where the kids could write whatever they wanted, and then the volunteers take it back and they respond to them, and it's kind of just kids say things when they write it down that they would never say in person. But I remember asking this one youth in these discussion journals, as I replied, I said, well, you come from a family that's very devout. All of your siblings, like, they have an older sister that's a religious sister. Two of the brothers were in seminary for a while. But I remember asking her, like, what was it about it? What did your parents do that you think made the difference to keep all of you really excited, engaged in the faith? And her response was simply, they never left us out of the difficult things. They always talked to us. They were honest with us about what was going on. And that really hit me. And that's been something. My siblings, we live in 3 different states, and when my mom was sick, like, that was actually one reason I, like, kind of initiated the conversation about her coming and living in our town, because I didn't want to hide my kids from the difficult things. And even one of my siblings actually said, like, this is going to hurt them. Like, they're going to fall in love with grandma and she's going to die. And I said, yeah, I know. And that's sad. And I don't want my kids to be sad, but I also want them to be strong. I want them to grow up, like, well-formed and aware of the world and all that it involves. And so I think that make a list of the many lies that the evil one's kind of been telling you about why not talk to your family about it, or why not get people more involved. Of course, whatever age your kids, it matters a bit. Our kids were pretty young. I think our youngest was 6 when my mom moved in. So it's scandalous to some extent. So is the crucifixion of the Son of God. Mm-hmm. Like, it's reality. It's things we need to learn. And so I'm not uncareful about it and not unthoughtful, but my biggest recommendation is just to be you, just to, like, surrender and be 100% you with your family, with your friends. Your kids love you. And I think your kids know something's up, probably. And so I think giving them ways that they can help you is probably the coolest thing in their minds that you could do, because they want to be your biggest cheerleader and they want to help. And it might be the most humbling thing, but what better witness and what better thing can you teach your kids than to humble themselves and to receive the gift of love and grace from other people and from God. So that would be my biggest thing, is just invite them into the journey. And just because it's hard, because you're going to be less, it's like going to confession. I hate that I go to confession, but I'm going to be less likely to keep doing it if I have to go tell someone about it. So that would be my biggest recommendation, because I've just seen kids again, I've probably worked closely with about 50 to 60 kids who the relationship with their parent is the primary struggle in their life. And I would bet that all those parents have some interior struggle or something that they're dealing with that is not a part of that relationship. And so there's just this like wall, and there's this bitterness and this anger and all this, and the evil one's just driving a wedge into that relationship. And anytime I've worked with a young person and they just went and talked to their parent about things, the doors opened up. So that would be my biggest recommendation: is don't think your kids are that you're supposed to be the perfect parents and you have to stay on your A game. Otherwise your kids are, I don't know, going to fault you, or the world's going to fault you. Every parent sins against their children, sins against their families. And it's just part of the mix in this world, unfortunately. Yeah. But again, by my story and by the many things I've experienced in many other people's lives, there's a text that my favorite spiritual text is called Into Your Hands, Father. It's by Father Wilfred Stinnison. It's on abandonment. But in it, he says, God makes use of evil in such superb ways that it's better than if evil had never existed in the first place. And so when you can like submit these things to God, I mean, you'll see what happens. And so we just have to trust in that. And I know kids are resilient. And again, just start the process now so they're not 30, 40 years old trying to sort it all out.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much for all of that. And I love that. Like when we shine the light on that darkness or on the things we don't want people to see, just kind of take it out and share it, it loses its power, because the more we hide it, the more we hold on to it, the more we try to keep it locked up, the worse it gets, the more anxious we get, the more shame we have. But when we bring that out to the light and share it, it just loses its power. And then, like you said, they can help finding ways that they can help you be healed and be healthy, I think is beautiful. So, Eric, go ahead and share all the things. Where can people find you? What do you got going? And I'll put links in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So this last January 2024, I started an online Catholic directory that they could look on there. It's the goal is to help people find everything Catholic. Still pretty new, so it's getting there though. We have hundreds, like several hundred listings, I think, but people can definitely check it out and recommend it. That'd be a great help. And hopefully soon it'll be a great help to everyone who just goes and visits it. It's getting there and we're excited about it. My main love and my main passion though is I was just brought on as the president of a new nonprofit that I helped start. And that's at Suscipe is the name of the organization. It's SUSCIPE. And we're basically investing all of the work of this nonprofit into this deeper spiritual formation, primarily with young people, but striving to do all the things that I really am encouraging through this podcast of just teaching people to dive into their spiritual life, to trust silence, to trust God, and to grow in their life of discernment and prayer. So if it's on someone's heart to support that ministry, it is a nonprofit, and we would love the support. We're brand new. It's literally is about a month old. And so I'm actually today, when we're recording this, setting out on our first financial campaign and big mailing. And so it's a lot of work. But yeah, to support that kind of work is so important.
We'll keep you in our prayers and for your ministry and everything that you've got going. Thank you so much for sharing not just your story, but so much hope and encouragement and information for my listeners. And I just really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Catholic Sobriety Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I would invite you to share it with a friend who might also get value from it as well. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I am the Catholic Sobriety Coach, and if you would like to learn how to work with me or learn more about the coaching that I offer, visit my website, thecatholicsobrietycoach.com. Follow me on Instagram at the Catholic Sobriety Coach. I look forward to speaking to you next time. And remember, I am here for you. I am praying for you. You are not alone.